The phone rang at exactly 3:15 p.m. on a Tuesday, right in the middle of my presentation to the marketing team. I ignored it the first time, but when it rang again immediately, I knew it was her. My mother, Linda, had been calling my office daily for 2 weeks now, each conversation more unhinged than the last. Her latest obsession was something I never thought I would hear from any parent, let alone my own. She wanted me to marry my stepbrother Dylan and have his children. I never thought my own mother would become my biggest threat, but here we were. Before I share what happened next, let me know in the comments where you are watching from, and please hit that like and subscribe button. You will not believe how far my mother was willing to go to control my life. My name is April, and I am 26 years old. I work as a marketing coordinator here in Denver, Colorado, living what I thought was a pretty normal life, until this nightmare began. My biological father passed away when I was 15, and my mother, Linda, remarried when I turned 18. Her new husband, Richard, seemed like a decent enough guy at the time. He owned several successful businesses around the city and had plenty of money, which I think attracted my mother more than anything else about him. Richard brought his son Dylan into our family. Dylan was 20 when our parents got married, 2 years older than me, and from day one, something about him made my skin crawl. He had this way of staring at me that felt completely inappropriate. During family dinners, I would catch him watching me eat, watching me laugh, watching me do absolutely nothing at all. When I would confront him about it, he would just smile and say something like, "I am just appreciating having such a beautiful new sister." The way he emphasized the word beautiful always made me uncomfortable. I was lucky enough to get accepted to Colorado State University that fall, so I moved to Fort Collins for college. Being away from home meant I only had to deal with Dylan during holidays and summer breaks, which was a relief. During those visits home, though his behavior only got worse, I started noticing things missing from my room or moved around. Once I found him going through my jewelry box when I came back early from running errands. He claimed he was just looking around and getting to know me better. Dylan would make comments about my appearance constantly. He would say things like, "April, you are getting more gorgeous every time you come home," or, "I bet all the guys at college are chasing after you." When I brought these incidents up with my mother, she would brush them off, saying Dylan was just being friendly and that I was overreacting to normal family bonding. After I graduated with my marketing degree, I moved back to Denver to start my career. I found a great position with a mid-sized advertising firm and got my own apartment about 20 minutes from where my mother and Richard lived. Dylan was still living at home at 28 years old, bouncing between part-time jobs and spending most of his time playing video games in the basement. Richard seemed frustrated with his son's lack of direction, but continued to support him financially. The first time my mother brought up the idea of Dylan and me as a couple, I thought she was joking. We were having coffee in her kitchen on a Saturday morning when she casually mentioned that Dylan had been asking about my dating life. She said he seemed really interested in whether I was seeing anyone seriously. When I told her that Dylan's interest in my personal life was inappropriate and weird, she got this strange look in her eyes. "April, honey, I think you should really consider giving Dylan a chance," she said, stirring her coffee slowly. "He has grown into such a handsome young man. And he adores you. Plus, it would keep everything in the family, you know? The money, the properties, all of it." I stared at her in complete shock. "Mom, are you seriously suggesting I date my stepbrother? That is absolutely disgusting." She leaned forward and grabbed my hand across the table. "Think about it logically, sweetheart. Dylan needs someone stable and responsible in his life. You could be so good for him. And Richard has been so generous to our family. He thinks of you as his own daughter now. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you really became his daughter?" I pulled my hand away and stood up from the table. "This conversation is over, Mom. I am not interested in Dylan romantically, and I never will be. The fact that you are even suggesting this makes me sick." She looked hurt and disappointed, but I thought that would be the end of it. I was so wrong. Within a week of that coffee conversation, my mother began calling me every single day. At first, the calls seemed innocent enough. She would check in on my work, ask about my social life, and then somehow steer the conversation back to Dylan. She started using emotional manipulation tactics that I had never experienced from her before. Your father would have wanted you to be happy with a good family, April. She would say, her voice getting shaky and emotional. Richard has been like a father to you these past 8 years. Do not you think you owe it to him to at least consider his son? Dylan talks about you constantly. He lights up whenever your name is mentioned. When emotional appeals did not work, she moved on to guilt trips about family loyalty and obligation. She would remind me of all the ways Richard had helped support me through college and early career. She claimed that Richard had always hoped Dylan and I would find each other, and that rejecting Dylan was like rejecting Richard's love and acceptance of me as a daughter. The most manipulative tactic was when she started bringing up my biological father. Your dad would want you to have security, honey, she would say. Dylan could provide that for you. Richard is already talking about making Dylan a partner in one of his businesses, but Dylan needs the right woman by his side to help him mature and succeed. She also began harping on my age and biological clock. You are 26 now, April. You are not getting any younger. Most of your friends are married or engaged already. Do not you want children someday? Dylan would be such a good father, and you two would have beautiful babies together. Hearing my mother talk about me having Dylan's children made me physically nauseated. I started avoiding her calls, but that only made things worse. She would call my work phone when I did not answer my personal cell. She started showing up at my apartment unannounced always with some excuse about being in the neighborhood. The family dinner invitations became more frequent and more insistent. Linda would guilt me into coming by saying Richard had specifically requested my presence, or that Dylan had prepared my favorite dish, or that they had important family news to share. During these dinners, she would orchestrate the seating arrangements so Dylan and I ended up next to each other. She would ask leading questions about our jobs, our interests, anything to try to highlight what she saw as compatibility between us. Meanwhile, Dylan's behavior was escalating in frightening ways. He started showing up at my workplace during lunch hours, claiming he just happened to be in the area. Our office building is downtown, nowhere near where Dylan would have any legitimate business. When I asked him how he knew where I worked and when my lunch break was, he said my mother had mentioned it in passing. Dylan began texting me constantly throughout the day. The messages started out seeming harmless, but quickly became inappropriate. He would send things like, "Thinking about you today, sis," or "Cannot wait to see you again soon," or "Mom says you have been working too hard, you should let me take you to dinner to relax." When I told him to stop texting me, he would back off for a few days, then start up again even more intensely. I discovered that Dylan had been stalking all of my social media accounts obsessively. He would like every single photo I posted within minutes of me posting it, no matter what time of day or night. He would comment on everything often with messages that seemed coded or overly familiar. When I posted a photo from a work happy hour, he commented, "Wish I was there with you, beautiful." When I shared a picture of a hiking trail, he wrote, "We should explore that together, sometime soon." The most disturbing discovery was when I realized Dylan had been asking other people about my schedule and habits. My neighbor mentioned that a young man had been asking questions about what time I usually got home from work. When I described Dylan, she confirmed it was him. My gym buddy told me someone matching Dylan's description had been asking the front desk staff about my workout schedule and what classes I attended. I felt like I was being watched constantly. Dylan seemed to know things about my daily routine that he should not have known. He knew which coffee shop I stopped at on my way to work. He knew what grocery store I shopped at and when. He knew which friends I spent time with and where we liked to meet up. Richard initially stayed out of the situation entirely, but after a few weeks, he started expressing support for Linda's plan. During one particularly uncomfortable family dinner, Richard cleared his throat and made what he called a practical proposition. "April, I know this might seem unconventional, but Linda and I have been talking about your and Dylan's futures," he said, cutting into his steak methodically. "From a financial standpoint, it would make sense for you two to consider building a life together. I have been thinking about setting Dylan up with his own business, but he needs someone responsible to help him manage it. You have the education and work ethic he lacks." Richard went on to explain that he owned several rental properties and a commercial building that could provide substantial passive income for a young couple just starting out. He mentioned his investment portfolio and retirement accounts, hinting that Dylan would inherit everything, but only if he settled down with the right person. I am getting older, April, and I want to make sure my assets stay in the family, Richard continued. If Dylan married someone outside our family, there would be no guarantee that our wealth would be preserved for future generations. But if he married you well, you are already like a daughter to me. It would ensure everything stays exactly where it belongs. I realized this was not some spontaneous idea Linda had developed. This was a calculated plan that both Richard and my mother had been developing for months, maybe even years. They had been planning my life without my consent, viewing me as some kind of breeding stock to legitimize their family fortune. That night, I decided I had to put some distance between myself and this toxic situation. I blocked Dylan on all social media platforms, stopped answering Linda's calls, and declined all family dinner invitations. I hoped that clear boundaries would send the message that I was not interested in their scheme. Instead, it made everything so much worse. When I stopped responding to Linda's calls and started avoiding family gatherings, my mother's behavior became absolutely unhinged. She began calling my office phone multiple times per day, telling our receptionist there was a family emergency and demanding to speak with me immediately. When I would take the call, there was never an actual emergency. Instead, she would launch into lengthy speeches about how I was abandoning my family and being ungrateful for everything Richard had done for us. Our receptionist, Sarah, started giving me concerned looks every time she had to transfer another call from my mother. "April, is everything okay at home?" she asked one afternoon. "Your mom sounds really upset every time she calls." I was mortified that my personal drama was affecting my professional environment. I explained to Sarah that my mother was going through some kind of crisis and asked her to start taking messages instead of transferring the calls directly to me. But Linda was persistent and creative in her attempts to reach me at work. She started calling the main office line and asking for my supervisor, claiming she needed to discuss important family matters that were affecting my work performance. She told my boss, Jennifer, that I was dealing with personal issues that might require time off, and that she wanted to coordinate my schedule to ensure I could attend family counseling sessions. Jennifer called me into her office to ask what was going on. I had to explain that my mother was having some kind of breakdown and that there were no actual family emergencies requiring my attention. Jennifer was understanding but concerned about the disruption to our workplace. She suggested I might want to consider having a formal conversation with human resources about the harassment. The most humiliating incident happened on a Thursday afternoon when I was in the middle of a client presentation. Linda showed up at our office building and convinced the security guard to let her come up to our floor. She burst into our conference room during my presentation, crying dramatically and demanding that I come with her immediately to resolve the family crisis. My clients looked shocked and uncomfortable. I had to excuse myself from the meeting and escort my mother out of the building while she continued sobbing loudly about how I was breaking the family apart and destroying Dylan's chances at happiness. The entire office watched as I guided her to the elevator, her voice echoing through the halls about how ungrateful children were ruining everything she had worked to build. I was absolutely humiliated. Jennifer had to reschedule the client meeting, and I spent the rest of the afternoon doing damage control, trying to maintain our professional relationship with confused and concerned clients. That evening, I seriously considered whether this situation might actually cost me my job. At the same time, Linda was harassing me at work. She was also spreading a completely false narrative about inheritance and family obligations. She started claiming that Richard had changed his will and that I would only receive my fair share of the family assets if I married Dylan. She said my biological father had made some kind of agreement with Richard before he died, ensuring that I would be taken care of, but only if I remained loyal to the family. Linda even produced documents that she claimed were related to Richard's estate planning. The papers looked official, with legal language about conditional inheritance and family unity requirements. She said Richard's attorney had drawn up these documents specifically to ensure Dylan and I would end up together, and that my portion of the inheritance was dependent on my willingness to fulfill my role in the family. I knew something was not right about these documents, so I scheduled a consultation with an estate planning attorney to understand my rights and options. During that meeting, I learned that conditional inheritances based on marriage arrangements are extremely rare and often legally questionable. The attorney explained that Richard could certainly choose to leave his assets to whomever he wanted, but the documents Linda had shown me contained several red flags that suggested they might be fabricated. I decided to do some research on my own. I contacted the law firm that Richard actually used for his business and estate planning. After some initial resistance due to confidentiality concerns, I was able to confirm that Richard had never created any documents tying my inheritance to marrying Dylan. In fact, Richard's actual will made no specific provisions for me at all, since I was not his biological or legally adopted child. Everything Linda had told me about inheritance agreements with my biological father and conditional estate planning was completely fabricated. She had created fake documents and built an elaborate lie to try to manipulate me into compliance with her scheme. Meanwhile, the broader family and social pressure was becoming unbearable. Linda had reached out to extended family members, presenting a carefully crafted version of events that made me look like the unreasonable party. She told my aunts and cousins that Dylan was deeply in love with me and that I was too proud and stubborn to see what a good match we would be. Family gatherings became nightmares. Relatives would pull me aside to talk about how good Dylan would be for me and how lucky I was to have someone who cared about me so much. Linda had convinced several family members that my reluctance was just normal pre-relationship jitters, and that I needed encouragement to open my heart to the possibility of love with Dylan. Some family friends started treating me coldly, apparently believing Linda's version of events. I felt socially isolated and emotionally exhausted from constantly having to defend my position and explain why I did not want to date my stepbrother. Throughout all of this chaos, Dylan himself was becoming more aggressive and persistent. Instead of backing off when it became clear I was not interested, he seemed to interpret the family drama as proof that I was playing hard to get or testing his commitment. His text messages became more frequent and more inappropriate. He started sending long paragraphs about our destiny together and how our children would unite two families into something beautiful. Dylan began showing up at places where I spent my free time. He would appear at my favorite coffee shop on Saturday mornings, at the grocery store where I did my weekly shopping, and at the park where I liked to jog. Each time he would act surprised to see me and try to start conversations about what a funny coincidence it was that we kept running into each other. The stalking behavior escalated to the point where I genuinely feared for my safety. Dylan seemed to know my schedule better than I did. He knew what time I left for work, what route I took to the office where I went for lunch, and what time I usually got home. I started varying my routines and looking over my shoulder constantly, but he always seemed to find me. I seriously considered getting a restraining order against Dylan, but I was worried about the family implications. Linda was already portraying me as the villain in this situation. If I took legal action against Dylan, she would probably use it as proof that I was overreacting and destroying the family over innocent romantic interest. But I was running out of options. Something had to change before this situation destroyed my career, my mental health, and my sense of safety. I realized I needed to take decisive action to protect myself and regain control of my life. The first thing I did was start documenting everything. I created a detailed log of every inappropriate phone call, every workplace interruption, every stalking incident, and every piece of false information Linda had shared about inheritance. I included dates, times, witnesses when available, and saved copies of all the fake legal documents she had shown me. I scheduled a formal meeting with Jennifer and our human resources director to explain the full scope of what was happening. I presented all my documentation and requested official support from the company to prevent future workplace harassment. They were incredibly understanding and immediately implemented a policy that Linda was not to be allowed in the building under any circumstances. They also documented everything in my employee file to protect me from any potential retaliation or false claims about my work performance. Next, I contacted the estate planning attorney again and asked her to help me prepare legal documentation to send to Richard. I wanted him to know that I was aware Linda had been lying about inheritance issues and that I had legal representation to protect my interests if necessary. The attorney helped me draft a formal letter requesting clarification about any estate planning that might involve me and asking Richard to confirm or deny the claims Linda had been making. The most difficult but necessary step was confronting Richard directly about Linda's deception. I called him at his office and asked to meet privately without Linda or Dylan present. Richard seemed surprised by my request, but agreed to meet me for coffee the following day. During our conversation, I presented Richard with copies of the fake documents Linda had shown me and explained everything she had been saying about inheritance and agreements with my biological father. Richard's face went through a series of expressions as he realized the extent of Linda's lies. He confirmed that he had never created conditional inheritance documents, never made any agreements with my biological father about my future, and never intended to tie my financial security to marrying Dylan. April, I am absolutely shocked, Richard said, studying the fake documents with increasing anger. These are completely fabricated. Linda has been lying to both of us. I never authorized any of this, and I certainly never intended for Dylan to harass you or for Linda to disrupt your workplace. Richard immediately called his attorney from the coffee shop and arranged for official documentation to be sent to both Linda and me, clarifying that no conditional inheritance existed and that any claims to the contrary were false. He also expressed serious concern about Linda's behavior and promised to address Dylan's stalking immediately. That evening, I had one final confrontation with Linda. I called her and told her I was recording the conversation for my own protection. I presented all the evidence I had gathered about her lies, harassment, and manipulation. I demanded that she stop contacting my workplace, stop spreading false information about inheritance, and stop encouraging Dylan's inappropriate behavior. Linda initially tried to deny everything, then became angry and defensive when she realized I had proof of her deception. She accused me of being ungrateful and destroying the family, but eventually broke down and admitted she had fabricated the inheritance story because she just wanted everyone to be happy together. I told Linda that she had 30 days to inform all family members and friends that she had been lying about the situation and that I would not tolerate any further harassment or manipulation. I also informed her that I was prepared to take legal action if Dylan continued stalking me or if she continued disrupting my workplace. The conversation ended with Linda crying and begging me to reconsider and give Dylan a chance. But I remained firm in my boundaries. I told her that any future contact needed to be respectful and appropriate, and that the topic of Dylan and me as a romantic couple was permanently off limits. Word of Linda's deception spread quickly through the family. Richard was furious and embarrassed about his wife's behavior. He had a serious conversation with Dylan about boundaries and appropriate behavior, threatening to cut off his financial support if the stalking continued. Several family members reached out to apologize for pressuring me based on Linda's false version of events. The harassment stopped almost immediately once the truth came out. Linda was too ashamed to continue calling my workplace after Richard and other family members confronted her about her lies. Dylan backed off completely when his father threatened real consequences for his behavior. My workplace relationships recovered quickly once my colleagues understood that the family drama was resolved. Jennifer commended me for handling the situation professionally and for being proactive about protecting both myself and the company from further disruption. I spent several months in therapy working through the emotional impact of being manipulated and harassed by my own mother. It was difficult to accept that someone who was supposed to love and protect me had been willing to fabricate elaborate lies and destroy my sense of safety to try to control my life choices. The therapy helped me understand that Linda's behavior was about her own issues with control security and family dynamics, not about my worth or decisions. I learned to set healthy boundaries with family members while still maintaining relationships with people who treated me with respect. I also focused heavily on rebuilding my sense of personal autonomy and trust in my own judgment. The manipulation had been so intense that I had started doubting my own perceptions and reactions. Through therapy, I regained confidence in my ability to recognize inappropriate behavior and protect myself from it. Over time, my relationship with Richard improved significantly. He was genuinely remorseful about Linda's behavior and made efforts to repair the damage she had caused. He respected my boundaries completely and never again suggested that I had any obligation to consider Dylan romantically. My relationship with Linda took much longer to heal. She eventually apologized for lying and manipulating me, but it took months for her to fully acknowledge how damaging her behavior had been. We now have a civil relationship with very clear boundaries about what topics are appropriate for discussion. Dylan and I have no relationship at all now, which is exactly how I prefer it. He moved out of Richard's house several months after this situation resolved and currently lives across town. We occasionally see each other at family events, but we do not interact directly. The most important lesson I learned from this experience is that family relationships should be based on love, respect, and mutual support, not obligation, manipulation, or control. Blood relations do not give anyone the right to harass you, lie to you, or try to dictate your life choices. Sometimes protecting yourself requires setting boundaries with people you love, even when it is painful or difficult. I also learned that manipulation can come from unexpected sources and can be very sophisticated. My mother used my love for her, my respect for family, and my desire for financial security to try to control my decisions. Recognizing these tactics helped me understand that her behavior was abusive, even though it came wrapped in language about family unity and love. Today, I am grateful that I found the courage to stand up for myself and demand better treatment. The experience was traumatic, but it also taught me valuable lessons about self-advocacy, boundary setting, and the importance of surrounding yourself with people who respect your autonomy and choices. If you are facing family pressure to make life choices that do not feel right to you, trust your instincts. No one else has the right to plan your life for you, no matter how much they claim to love you or how much they have done for you in the past. Your happiness and safety should never be negotiable, and anyone who truly loves you will respect your decisions, even if they do not understand them. Have you ever experienced family pressure to make decisions that felt wrong for you? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family drama and toxic relationships. Share this video with anyone who might be struggling with similar boundary issues. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you feel less alone if you are dealing with family manipulation. Remember, you deserve relationships built on respect and genuine love, not control and obligation.